Hello, everyone. My name is Reverend Will Bouvel.
I'm Michelle Harrington.
We are at St. Chrysostom's Church, Chicago, and we're grateful to get to speak to many of you who are likely parishioners as well. But for anyone who isn't, we want to welcome you on this journey as well, along with us. We have embarked to read for Lent a wonderful book called Howard Thurman's Jesus and the Disinherited. And we wanted to have a chance to just introduce it to you and share a little bit about why we're so excited about that this coming season and the hopes that we have for what it might offer to us spiritually in this season of reflection and penitence. So, Michelle, can you share a little bit about who Howard Thurman was?
Howard Thurman was a fantastic spiritual resource for the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King and many other leaders in the civil rights movement. Um, he's been referred to as both a prophet and a mystic. I find him to be a man of deep spirituality and palpable integrity. And so I'm excited that we're reading this book together during our Lenten journey as we travel sort of inward and outward together.
That's right. I think one of the things that I'm curious about this as we explore this is this had an amazing historical impact on its world, which was the civil rights movement. This book was written in the late 40s, right?
That's right.
And we read it still today, not just because of the impact it had then.
It's still fresh, as you'll
That's
see
right.
as you go through these themes.
That's right. I noticed something I just wanted to share that I was just talking to Michelle about before we started, that the foreword of the book really does lean into some of the historical themes and the historical impact that the book has had. That took me into a place that I didn't expect, which was very different from Thurman's writing itself. So as you begin and read the foreword, I just ask you to note that that is a very different tone than the book itself that will come in chapter 1.
But I think that foreword asks us to consider the theme of Howard's own work is that there are different groups of people who have their backs against the wall at any particular historical time. And so in our small groups, we can be imagining who those people are today.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Do you think it's inappropriate to view ourselves as white people in a fairly wealthy city, in a fairly wealthy part of that city, as people who have our backs against the wall?
I can imagine some of us in this sort of socioeconomic group who have had life experiences that may have put us there for a time or even in the present. But I think that this book asks us to extend our sympathies wider, particularly for people who are dispossessed by the political situation, who feel not fully citizens and don't have the protections of the state. And there are many of those people today. We can think of still African Americans who may not be equally protected by the law, in fact. Immigrant groups, people who work in factories under horrific conditions. There are a lot of places that we can extend our imaginations together.
Now, I noticed in the foreword and in the first chapter how it does speak about African Americans as and comparing them with those in Jesus' time who might have felt like they were not full citizens. I imagine some of you all might be wondering, or might come up in your discussions, that, well, things have changed. One question I ask for you to wonder about is how much have things changed, and maybe how much have they not changed? When we look at and use a book like this, is there anything that you can point us to in how we might negotiate some of those historical differences versus where we find ourselves in the conversation now?
I think that within our small groups, we might want to integrate our reading with data and surveys and the texts that have come out. For instance, I've done work in the field of medical ethics, and there's, particularly in Black women today, a phenomenon called weathering, where the telomeres of their DNA are shortened or they carry a higher allopathic load. And I think that Thurman kind of returns to this phrase, a nerve-weary civilization. And there are those people that are so dispossessed in sort of intersectional ways that it lives in their very physiology. And I think that that is very much still ongoing today. And so we can sort of broaden our imaginations and our thoughtfulness around those issues as we read.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know anything about that. That's amazing. And it speaks to how, while some laws may have changed, there is something about the inheritance that people of color have that stays with them through those laws. And it's not just about the way they're perceived by others, but actually their own health and their own bodies, that it's somehow been ingrained.
Right.
I think that that's something for us all to be curious about.
Sure.
As we both wonder about how people of color are still can be found in this state of having their backs against the wall, and also hold for ourselves the ways that we might see ourselves as having our back against the wall.
Yes.
I think we can do both, but we want to honor each one. I guess that's what I hope we can kind of keep those apart. We don't want to make this all about us, right. white people. It's not all about us, and it has something to offer us.
Sure.
Trying to hold those two things together, I think, will make this a really rich experience for us.
And as you're sort of gesturing towards this, and what I wanted to gesture towards was that Howard Thurman himself was a man of deep integration, and he thought that these things lived in our bodies. And so there's a knitting together of intellectual thought about what we know, our bodies and how we comport ourselves in the world, our spirituality. And for this Lenten journey, we can be on the way together to working from the inside out, what he calls our spiritual center, and then using that greater liberation, hopefully, that this points us towards achieving, to engage in social transformation. So I think it's a really appropriate Lenten journey for us.
That's wonderful.
We all need to get free. Those who have their backs against the wall and those who aren't experiencing that right now. There's a way that we might be able to wear our privilege more lightly, to inhabit a more genuine humility that makes us able to be better brothers and sisters to every human being that we meet. And so I think that this is a really positive and profound journey that we get to take together.
You put it so well, that we all need to be made free. That's what we get to do in church. We get to wonder about how we might find new freedom in Jesus Christ. And I think a lot of times people, especially in our community, don't think that we're looking for freedom. In some of the discussion questions that'll be offered to you in all your groups, John McLeese, who's a member of our organizing group, offered the question or the hope that this book might give us all learning to see rightly by focusing on Jesus. So all of us have the opportunity to see ourselves differently through Jesus than we have in the way that the world tells us. And I feel like that's why we've decided to offer this and encourage the community to all gather around it, is not so much because of its historical impact, but because it helps us to see better through someone else's experience, which is very different from ours, how fully we might know ourselves through knowing Jesus. And that, I believe, is really good news for all of us, this freedom that you are speaking of. Wouldn't it be wonderful if this Lent, you groups in our community could lead our whole community into a fuller experience of the freedom that we might know through Jesus? I find that that's why this penitential season of Lent is really so powerful, because it gives us the chance to go deeper. I think penitence sometimes sounds like it's punishment.
Right.
And that's not what I'm interested in advancing. Rather, it should be a gift.
Yeah, thoughtful reflection and the time to do that together.
That's right. That's right. And that's what I hope for all of us in this study, that we might receive the gift of new life, which we get to celebrate at Easter. That's why Easter can become such a beautiful thing when we've done work like this through Lent. It might be hard. Penitence isn't usually easy, but it doesn't need to be punishing. Do you have any other final thoughts for the groups as they begin these discussions?
I mean, it makes me think of the qualities of Thurman himself, a firm lovingness, and I think that we would see that in Jesus if we look to that as well. So I think that those are nice meditations for us. Thomas Merton, the monk and monastic, had a quote that I think he might actually have gleaned from Howard Thurman when he said, "To be a saint is to be myself." And so I think that we're on that journey of paring away the inessential and learning to see ourselves as God made us, to offer our particular gifts in the world, to have increasing genuine encounters with every other human being, and to begin that beloved community.
Amen.
Amen.
Wouldn't that be a great thing this Lent? And so we really hope, thank you for that reflection. I'm so excited to walk alongside with all of you as we go further into this book. Michelle and I will have a conversation like this to introduce each of the chapters. Is there anything you want to say about chapter 1 before we move on?
There are a few reflections, and you'll all get to them together as you read. But the idea that Jesus, and at the particular time that Thurman was writing this, African Americans shared great similarities that perhaps we haven't appreciated is a really significant one. Jesus himself, as you'll read in the book, was a Jew, a poor Jew, and a Jew under a dominating empire without full recourse to the benefits of citizenship. And Thurman reflects on the experience of those that don't, even like St. Paul did, have that in their back pocket, the protections of law and the rights of citizenship, and what it means for one's nerves to be under that kind of anxiety and sort of up against the wall without protection, almost like a scared animal. It's a very wearing psychological situation. So we'll grow to appreciate that. But also to think about what it means for Jesus in his own particular moment that he inhabited that way of being and did it with such genius. What can we learn from that?
Yeah, beautifully put. There's so much to learn about Jesus.
Yes.
Which is amazing. I mean, this is not just a book that talks about the civil rights movement. It's not just a book that talks about African Americans. It allows us to recognize the genius of Jesus, like you said. And in that, to go deeper and connect, I think, more with the situation that maybe a lot of us have learned or gotten used to. It allows us to get a little bit more connected to the truth of those stories, things that maybe we've just overlooked.
Yes, as Thurman points out, the Jesus movement began among the poor and dispossessed, and now it's very much the province of the powerful and those in charge. So what does that mean for our faith? What does that mean for our church and the way that we worship together? There'll be a lot of provocative questions that this chapter will raise. That's
right. And it makes us wonder about who are we, ultimately? And what is the quality that the Spirit is speaking to our church now? And that's a real challenging question, to notice where the Spirit is moving and what it might have to say to us. So I think that would be a wonderful point of reflection for your groups as you wonder about this first chapter. Anything else you want to share?
Do you want to talk about your first encounter with the book?
Sure. So the first time I read this wasn't too long ago. It's amazing. I've known of the book for a while. I was ordained just this past summer, and before I got ordained, I had the chance to go on a retreat to a Quaker retreat center called Pendle Hill in Pennsylvania, which happens to be nearby where my parents live. I didn't intend to go there. It's funny, I had some other plans fall through, and so I just ended up very last minute at Pendle Hill. And when I was there, I had two little projects I wanted to work on, and one of them was to read Jesus and the Disinherited. I did. I read in my tiny, very spare little room. It was very nice. I had a great stay there. The food is wonderful. Highly recommend it. I went to some Quaker meetings as well. But when I was leaving, the day I was leaving, I was having a chat with one of the longer-term visitors there, and shared that I had just read Jesus and the Disinherited and found it amazing. And he said, well, he came here. Howard Thurman, came to Pendle Hill and, presented workshops and met with people. And I was just so moved
Yes.
to think that this amazing book, and it really is, I think, a transformative book, not just when I read it that summer, not just for the civil rights movement, but it is a real amazing transformation of our faith into something that it hasn't been.
Yeah.
And so it's exciting to have been there where that man walked and worked, and it's exciting to get to share it with all of you.
Great. Yeah, that's amazing. I didn't know that, and I think also that this is a very concise book that is capable of opening up the fundamentals of our faith to us if we'll let it.
That's right. Take your time with it. It is a work of theology, and it does, sometimes I'm used to this because I do it a lot, but I reread things over and over again. If you find yourself skimming over it and kind of not going very deep, just go back, take your time. There's not a lot of pages. If you go deep into just one section, even if you don't finish it for each week, I think that'll serve you the best to really connect to the text that's there. Well, the bells are summoning us to church, and so we are so excited. We'll be your guides for this journey, and as will your group leaders, and we can't wait to see where this leads us through the season of Lent and into hopefully a new life of Easter this coming April.
Great Lent to you all.